The United States and its allies are sending a strong message to China, Russia, and other foreign adversaries as some of the world's top diplomats hold high-stake meetings this week. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in London for major talks with other G7 countries. He met with South Korea's top diplomat earlier, and he's meeting with the UK Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab today as well. They're set to discuss a wide range of issues, including the pandemic, climate change, and global trade. Secretary Blinken is laying the groundwork for next month's G7 summit featuring President Biden and other world leaders. This comes as the U.S. slams China over its intellectual property theft, human rights abuses, and military aggression. Secretary Blinken addressed this during a new interview with Norah O'Donnell that aired on 60 Minutes last night.
I know you say the goal is not to contain China, but have you ever seen China be so assertive or aggressive militarily?
No, we haven't. I think what we've witnessed over the last several years is China acting more repressively at home and more aggressively abroad. That is a fact.
What's China's goal?
I think that over time, China believes that it can be and should be and will be the dominant country in the world.
If Xinjiang isn't a red line with China, then what is?
Look, we don't have the luxury of not dealing with China. There are real complexities to the relationship, whether it's the adversarial piece, whether it's the competitive piece, whether it's the cooperative piece.
Secretary Blinken also says China is threatening the rules-based international order that governs how countries deal with each other. This comes as China aims to have the biggest economy in the world after surpassing the United States in just a few years. For more on this, let's bring in Ambassador James Jeffrey. He is the chair of the Middle East program at the Wilson Center, and he's also the former U.S. ambassador to Iraq and Turkey and special envoy to the global coalition to defeat ISIS. Mr. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on this morning.
So what is your take on Secretary Blinken's remarks with regards to China, and how exactly is the United States hoping to, what exactly is the United States hoping to accomplish during these G7 talks this week, especially as it relates to Beijing?
The most important thing Tony said, other than what China is trying to achieve, which is the dominant role in the world, is that we have a trilateral relationship. It is adversarial, almost an enemy. It is competitive, particularly in the economic realm, and it's cooperative on things like climate and possibly COVID. What he is saying is, in demonstrating by talking to the other members of the G7 in South Korea, is the United States will build up a very, very strong international coalition to defend this rules-based order that China is trying to pull apart as part of its rise to dominance. We're not going to do this alone. We're going to do it with our partners. That's a very strong message because China may think it can outcompete us. It cannot outcompete the rest of the developed world.
So, Ambassador, Secretary Blinken is going to be traveling to Ukraine on Wednesday. Ukraine had been sort of appealing to NATO for some sort of support as Russia was ramping up troops along the border. Russia's troops are now withdrawing, but there is obviously a message being sent with the visit from the Secretary of State. What message do you believe that is that's being sent to Moscow?
First of all, that we do stand by Ukraine, and we're absolutely opposed, as is NATO, as is Europe, as is the international community, to any further Russian aggression in Ukraine. By the same token, we're not trying to provoke Russia. As Secretary Blinken said last night on 60 Minutes, it's hard to assess what Russia was trying to do with its military buildup, but it has pulled back some of the forces. And frankly, I think this is probably a limited win for the administration.
As you know, Mr. Ambassador, President Biden recently imposed sanctions on Russia and expelled Russian diplomats, yet he says he wants to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin next month, which is always important for the American president, the U.S. president, to meet with President Putin. But what would the strategy be here, and how would it differ from what we saw with former President Trump?
President Trump tried to have a close relationship with President Putin. It did not work out, and by the second half of the administration, and I worked in that administration, the relationship was quite cold over Syria, Ukraine, and Russian interference in American domestic affairs. What we're trying to do, I think, with President Biden is to show, on the one hand, we have an adversarial relationship with Russia. In some respects, it's even more clearly adversarial than with China. But there are certain issues we want to deal with Russia. It is the second strongest nuclear power in the world. We have to have a dialogue. We just completed an extension of our nuclear arms treaty with Russia. And that's the kind of thing that Biden wants to continue doing with the Russians while he is containing them and deterring them in Ukraine, in the Middle East, and against our domestic political system and economy.
Secretary Blinken also discussed the Biden administration's decision to withdraw all U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 11th. Some of those forces began leaving the war-torn country just over the weekend, and he also spoke about this during his 60 Minutes interview last night. I want to play a little of what he had to say.
We have to be prepared for every scenario, and there are a range of them. And we're looking at this in a very clear-eyed way. But, Nora, we've been engaged in Afghanistan for 20 years, and we sometimes forget why we went there in the first place. And that was to deal with the people who attacked us on 9/11. And we did. Just because our troops are coming home doesn't mean we're leaving. We're not. Our embassy's staying. The support that we're giving to Afghanistan when it comes to economic support, development, humanitarian, that remains.
So, Ambassador, you know this region quite well. The U.S. would be leaving Afghan forces to sort of fend for themselves. The Taliban is still quite active there. What is your take on the administration's plan to remove all forces, keeping it in mind what we just heard from the Secretary of State? Is this a good idea?
I believe it is. And I've been involved in every bad military deployment from Vietnam through Iraq. In the end, we usually muddle through. The one exception is Afghanistan. The Taliban is on the march militarily despite 2,500 American troops and almost 10,000 more NATO troops supporting the Afghan government. What Blinken is saying is, and his words were well weighed, we've been doing this for 20 years. That's enough time. We went in there to defeat al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. We've way beyond that at this point, and we're going to leave. Now, he's not saying we're going to abandon Afghanistan. We'll still have an embassy there. We'll still try to work diplomatically, but good luck. This is now primarily a military conflict. The Taliban has the initiative. It is going to be very, very hard to stop them from seizing much of the country once we're gone. And Blinken understands that, and he's willing to take that on, as is the president.
Mr. Ambassador, before I let you go, let me ask you, given your experience in the Middle East and in Turkey, your thoughts on President Biden finally recognizing the Armenian genocide. In the past, American presidents have been urged to do so by members of the Armenian American community, by even members of Congress. It's been sort of bipartisan, but most have declined to do so. I believe back in 1981, President Reagan may have referenced it, may have called it a genocide, but I know President Trump, for example, called it one of the worst mass atrocities of the 20th century, but did not recognize it as a genocide. I want to know if you've heard from diplomats in Turkey or even from folks that you know there, how they feel about this, what you've heard from the Armenian community, and do you agree with President Biden's decision?
Well, President Biden made this a campaign pledge. He carried out his campaign pledge. That is a good general rule. Armenians, of course, are very happy because this is part of their heritage. Turks are bitterly disappointed. They understand what happened in the Ottoman Empire to the Armenians, and they're not proud of it. But they don't want to be blamed for, again, what happened in another regime over 100 years ago. President Biden was very careful not to blame Turkey. He was very careful to make it clear that it stops here, we declare it a genocide and move on. And I think that the Turkish reaction has basically been moderate and balanced, and I think that we'll continue a very productive relationship with a very complicated but important ally, Turkey.
All right, Ambassador James Jeffrey, thank you, sir, for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much.